6 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and get started for tonight's Design Review Board. This is a regular Design Review Board meeting of the City of Milton. I am Ken Warlick. This is a 7-member board appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations. Design Review Board reviews building and LDP plans and makes recommendations to the Community Development Director for the developments except single-family residential in the form-based code and overlay districts. In addition, the Design Review Board approves or denies demolition requests and makes recommendations to the Board of Zoning of Appeals on variance requests and the Planning Commission for use permits and rezoning requests. So at this time, I would like to call this meeting to order and ask everyone in attendance to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. As always, I would like to introduce our staff and our board members, if we can start.
Jackie Lim, Planner 2.
Rima Abdel Fattah, Zoning Technician.
Samia Coker, 215 Cheltenham Walk.
Celeste Jackson, Saddle Springs Drive.
Casey Robinson, 530 Parkbrook Trace.
Ken Warlick, Hipworth Road.
Danielle Gagne, Morning Mountain Way.
David Jackson, Bethany Way.
Great, thank you. All right, next we're going to move on to approval and amendment of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I would like to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented.
I second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Gagne and a second from Mr. Robinson. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, next we're going to do the approval of the minutes or the meeting minutes from our January 9th Design Review Board meeting. Do I have any discussion or a motion for that?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 9th action report as presented.
I second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Gagne and a second from Mr. Robinson. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. All right, moving on. Tonight we'll start 5A, demolition of structures. Our first demolition hearing is 5A, 200 Hereford Road. Ms. Jackie, if you will go ahead and give us some background information on this one.
Good evening, board members, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair. Tonight, our first case is 200 Hereford Road, and it's located in the 5-acre state subdivision. The size of the property is 5 acres. It's zoned single family dwelling or R2. It's within the State Route 9 overlay district. The existing use currently is residential. This property was built in 1979. The request for this is to demolish the existing house, the pool, retaining wall, and a portion of a concrete driveway and turnaround. So just to give you a perspective of the location of this property, here's the aerial map. You can see Cogburn Road to the west and Alpharetta Highway or Highway 9 North to the east of that property. And this was the site plan that was submitted to community development. And just zoom out or zoom in, and just to give you the location of the structures to be demolished on that property. And just a note that the horse barn is to remain. Sharing some photos of the structure. Side elevations. Rear elevation, and a portion of it you can see the existing pool. And then from this angle, you can see the existing barn. just some photos of what that barn looks like. So just some information, this property is not in a flood zone area. No trees to be removed during the demolition process. There is a sanitary sewer easement and drainage easement in the middle of the property. And then lastly, there is a primary variance application for the horse barn, and it's currently under review. So that is going to come back to us for courtesy review for the barn, and then it goes to BZA for the variance application. And of course, we do our due diligence to check if this property is historic or not, and I've confirmed that this is not actually a historic property. Therefore, staff recommends approval with our standard comments that they have to complete the demo permit application. And of course, put limits of disturbance, the tree-safe fences and silt fences. And if there's a water well or septic that will not be used, it will be capped properly according to Fulton County regulation. And then any disturbed and exposed soil must be level and permanently grass. Questions for staff before we call the applicant?
Is the barn just due to its proximity to the side setback?
To the property line.
The property
So
line.
I believe it's less than 100. So any barn that houses animals, it has to be 100 feet away from all property lines.
Okay.
Do we know if the footprint's going to remain the same on the house or if they're going to expand it at all?
So that would be a question for the applicant. Okay. Yeah, they will let you know.
Okay. Yep, go ahead, please.
Matt Thrash, the builder, my partner, Artie Marchman, the architect that drew the plan. So questions about the plan? Take your shot at him. He can probably have the correct answer for you.
Okay.
But no, the footprint will change.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to enlarge.
Would you like to see it?
Sure.
Yeah, if you've got a
We have
copy,
a
that'd be
large
great.
copy.
Yeah, the smaller copy can probably go in the overhead.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the smaller copy would be fine, thank you.
You want to put it in the overhead? Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Just wanna take a quick look. Oh, okay.
While Jackie's doing that, was there any other information that staff didn't present us that you guys would have, or?
No, we've
Okay.
done our due diligence. We've gone through the process. There's no red package involved. We'll demo the existing septic tank, per the regulations,
Okay,
all it to the permitted places.
okay.
Rid of. We're not going to leave it on site.
That's good, thank you. Are there any questions from the board for the applicant?
I had a question.
Sure.
So with the pool, when you're getting rid of a pool, is there an engineer involved, and how are there like compaction studies? How do you prevent that soil from, are you filling in the pool, I'm assuming?
No, it'll be torn out completely.
Okay,
And they're having a pool with the new house that'll be reconstructed.
right,
Yeah.
Fill the pool with dirt.
right.
Yeah,
Test on that. The house is not set with.
Okay, but there'll still be a compaction test on where
Yeah,
the pool
absolutely. Well,
was excavated.
that is up to the pool man. We don't do the pool per se.
Mhm.
We'll demo the pool, but the contract is with a pool individual. We don't build pools, so he'll have to do his due diligence and confirm that the pool is in stable condition for the pool.
Okay.
And then when they're ready to actually build a home, they submit a plan, site plan and the building plan. And, we have a site engineer that looks at all of this.
Okay.
So, but what helps the whole process, though, that this is a basement house, the current house, the picture's gone, is a slab. So we will be getting into virgin soil
Gotcha.
for all intents and purposes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. I would like to open up public comments. Do we have
We have
any?
none.
We have none. All right, then I will close public comment. Okay. Discussion amongst the board? No? Okay. All right, then seeing no discussion, can I get a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the demolition of 200 Hereford Road.
I second. Sorry.
I'll go with.
That's fine.
All right, so I have a motion for approval from Mr. Jackson and a second from Ms. Gagné. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Congrats, good luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next month.
We can ask more questions.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, we will be 5B, 2880 Mountain Road. Miss Jackie, if you will.
All right, our next case is 2880 Mountain Road. This is a 7.27 acre lot. It's zoned agricultural within the rural Milton overlay district. Existing use is residential. This house was built in 1970, and the applicant requests to demolish the existing house. Just the aerial view, location of the property in Milton. The site plan that was submitted to community development. And the location of the structure. And again, like the first case, the existing structure to remain used to be a barn in the past, but right now it's no longer housing animals. I believe it is now, it's like a garage. So to the right, you'll see the location of that existing house that will be demolished. Some structure photos, front elevation, side elevations of the house.
Looks like they're ready for demolition.
They're ready, once it's approved and the demo permit has been issued, they're ready to go.
I'd like to defer.
And then just want to show you the existing structure behind that property that is to remain. So some supplemental information, this property is not located in a flood zone area, no trees to be removed during the demo process. Again, the existing structure is to remain, but will not house animals. There is an existing LDP permit, an LDP permit has been issued, but we have an existing building permit for a single family dwelling that is still plan in check. So. And then, of course, our criteria for approving demolition, this property has no historic or significant value. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the demolition per the site plan that we receive with the following comments. If there's any question for staff, I'd be happy to answer.
I do have a question for you, Jackie, and I don't know if this would be something more suited for the applicant, but it does show a good bit portion of that gravel, the existing gravel drive, which looks like it's on an adjacent property. Is that correct or no?
Yes. So that's actually, I've seen some gravel, especially the entrance, but I haven't noticed the ones that going towards the property to the back. that's probably a good question for the applicant.
Okay. Almost like there's a fence, but the fence has been, okay. Any other questions for staff?
What is the plan for the property? Are they rebuilding or I'm confused by it.
Yes, I'm Paul Young. I own the property. Yes, we're going to rebuild. We're going to put a new house down in front of the barn. Garage, let me say. We're not putting any animals back on the property.
Okay. So while you're here, the gravel drive, it looks like, I guess it kind of meanders through the adjacent property. Is that
Yeah,
correct? or-
there's actually 3 lots. It was 10 acres
Okay,
and there's 2 other lots behind the lot that I have.
okay,
So actually my family, I got 2 daughters that are going to be built right behind us.
Okay.
So that's how it's set up right now.
okay,
One of the things they wanted was a second driveway, and it already has a gravel driveway. We will have a concrete driveway going through to the houses, and where the house is right now, the old house is right where the driveway is going to go be to the
Got it.
new house.
okay.
I thought they had the drawings showing where the new house is being placed. It's right in front of the barn and in front of the paddock, right there, inside the paddock. Part of it.
Okay.
It's a 3,500 square foot house, 4 garages.
And the garage in the back.
Huh?
And the garage in the back.
Well, I got it filled up right now with tractors and stuff like
Yeah.
that to keep up the place.
Got it. Okay. Anything else?
No, just ask
Okay.
for y'all's approval to
I
get this
have a
done so we can move on.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does that say that it's an impervious setback, 75 foot?
Yeah, we're fine.
You're building
Yeah.
behind that?
Yes.
Okay.
And that would be handled through the permitting, correct? Yeah.
So when they apply for a building permit, that's one thing that we look at as well.
Okay.
We make sure that it stays away from that impervious setback.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Is that a detention pond on the site?
Yes.
Do you have all that tested again? How does that work with the city? Do you have to go through testing for that on your site?
So
The
when they're
detention pond?
ready, we have a site engineer that when they submit the application for LDP or building permit, they look at the totality of the property. And the LDP has been issued, so
Mhm.
therefore they already look into that.
Okay.
The location of detention pond, everything that's related to site.
I would imagine if you're putting 3 houses on that site, they'll be increasing the load that
For
may
the
be going in there,
detention.
the flow.
Mhm.
But you're not putting 3 houses on this site. You
There's 10 acres
10 acres. Okay.
altogether was what I bought.
Got it. Okay.
And each one of
But they're
the,
adjacent parcels, you said, were yours.
yes.
Oh, they're
They're
adjacent.
behind that.
Yeah.
I missed that, okay.
Got it.
So
Okay.
his lot alone is like 7 point something
7.2.
acres.
Is
Okay.
detention required when you have more than 3 acres on a single-family residential?
Actually, I have
I don't know
no
if it
idea
is.
about
No.
that. That's
Okay.
a good question for
Okay.
our engineer.
You got a big pond there, so that might handle it,
know.
I'm sure.
Well, actually, you can't use the pond as that for that, so.
I'm familiar with that as well. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? No? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item 5B.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second. All right. So I have a motion from Ms. Gagney and a second from Ms. Jackson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. Congrats.
you.
Good luck.
You can tell that person driving that tractor knocked down a.
Yes. We just got to get the demo permit first. Right? So. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so tonight, moving on, we do not have any courtesy reviews, any final reviews, but we do have 8A new business training on Robert's Rule of Order.
Woo-hoo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Tracy. I'm with the law firm of Gerard and Davis, who serves as the city attorney for the city of Milton. And I was asked to come tonight and kind of give y'all some basics on your roles as DRB members and a little bit of procedural stuff. I know this says training on Robert's rules. This really isn't so much training on Robert's rules. I'll consider it more of a hitting the high points of your roles and responsibilities and how sort of to run an efficient meeting, best practices for that. And this slideshow has been put together by others in my office. It's like 29 slides. I don't think we're going to need to go through all of them, but if y'all want to stop me for questions along the way, please feel free to. Can y'all see the slideshow?
Yep.
Got it up there? Okay. So, the first place we start is when you get appointed to your board, you're all serving on the design review board, is where do we look for your authority and your rules? And so this is a broad overview here of your bylaws. In the city charter, there's authority for the board to of how you should function, to elect a chair, a vice chair, and you do have the ability to also draft your own bylaws. Jackie, I don't know, do they have
Yes.
those drafted?
Yeah, we do.
So I don't have, Jackie will have a copy of those if you want them. But also within the city code, you do have a reliance on Robert's rules, on the most current versions of Robert's rules. Now, Robert's rules, you can get a little book and, it will tell you more than you probably ever wanted to know about parliamentary procedure. What you all really need to focus on is later in this presentation. And honestly, I watched y'all handle your hearings and your motions tonight, and you're doing a great job. So you've got the basics down definitely, but we'll go over that in some more detail.
Taking some practice.
So there's a few slides here sort of on the nature of the design review board. I know some of you have been on the board for a bit, and there's some newer folks as well. And so some of you may be very familiar with this and others not as much, but this is the code section, section 64-973 that spells out why we need a design review board, and that the mayor and city council finds that as a matter of public policy, that the aesthetic, economic, and functional qualities are worthy of enhancement and preservation and are essential to the promotion of the health, prosperity, safety, and general welfare of the existing and future residents of the city. And we have established the design review board in furtherance of those goals, and it goes through more of the purpose of the design review board. And then in subsection B down here, you'll see that it talks about some of the public policy objectives that you should keep in mind as you are dealing with the items that come before the design review board, talking about spatial relationship of structure to open spaces, appearance of the buildings, as to the overlay districts that you are dealing with within the city, to recommend appropriate design approaches and provide an objective basis for review, ensuring consistency and fairness. These sections are again spelling out what the design review has authority and what items come before you on a regular basis, to review all non-residential plans for development within those overlay districts that are spelled out there. And then in section 231, to make recommendations to the Community Development Department prior to approval of a land disturbance permit, building permit, or primary variance. More of the roles here regarding the demolition, land disturbance permit, demolition permit, or building permit that requires our certificate of endorsement. Down here in section 64-1025, kind of an important thing to remember. And I know staff keeps y'all on track with this, but a completed application for a certificate of endorsement needs to come before the board within 90 days, or it stands as automatically approved as submitted. I know staff does a good job at keeping those running. Demolitions permits, obviously y'all dealt with 2 of those tonight and did a great job. And Jackie had it in her presentation there for both of you, these requirements or criteria in deciding to approve the demolition permit, including the historic, if there's a historic nature, of course, that's a big element that we have to look out for. Even if it's not formally historic, is there any significance? There's plenty of landmarks and buildings that might not have that formal stamp of historic approval from the state, but might otherwise have a significance for the community. This comes up a lot with all sorts of boards that we represent, and often in the land use context, which is the effect of a decision that is made, whether it's a demolition permit or whether it's one of these items where you offer a recommendation and comment, is what is the precedent of that decision? If I do it for one applicant, am I bound to do the same thing for another applicant? And what I would say about that is that there's really, it's hard to ever see 2 applications as the same. There's always unique facts and circumstances for each parcel of land that you're looking at, for each project that you may be looking at. So it's rare that a decision that you make on one item that comes before you is going to set a hard and firm precedent that you have to follow going forward. But if you do have that odd situation where they're all the same, the specs of the project are nearly identical, they do deserve the same treatment. Obviously, it would raise concerns if you're treating one differently than the other. All right, so running meetings, and this gets in a bit to procedure. This is generally the outline of how a meeting would proceed, and I think that from what I saw tonight, that's how it's running currently. So, after the chair calls the meeting to order, the first item is typically the adoption of the agenda or any amendments to the agenda. Amendments you have to be careful with just because you are a public meeting and things have to be noticed appropriately before they can be discussed and voted on in a public meeting. But there are some times when an amendment is appropriate, particularly if you're going to be removing something from an agenda because you already know that the applicant perhaps is not going to be present or has an emergency or so on and so forth. The second item is typically reviewing and approving the minutes from your last meeting, and then going forward to your public hearings on your items that are before you.
I had a question about that. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
David brought that up earlier. We did a motion to approve the minutes from our December meeting in January. However, there was only 2 board members that were actually here in that meeting, but it says 6-0 approved. Is that?
That's not a problem. So the minutes are when you vote to approve the minutes, that is putting the stamp, of approval of the body that is a true and correct record of what occurred. So you do not have to be present at a meeting to vote then on the minutes, because there are methods that a board member can satisfy themselves that it is a true and correct recitation of what happened, whether that means you reviewed the video or whether that means you spoke with others or you talked with staff, just however you've made yourself comfortable that is a true and correct record.
Thank you.
Yep. Comes up a lot, actually. All right, so this next slide is really talking about how you deal with these business items that come before you. And I think what you did tonight was followed these steps pretty much exactly. So you're doing a great job. But the first step is for the chair to identify the item that is before you. The staff then comes up and makes the presentation of what's before you for a decision or recommendation. The board is then able to address questions to the applicant and staff. And then there is the public comment section. Obviously, there were none present tonight. The one thing that I would say is it was obvious that there was no one here tonight. If you ever are in a situation where you maybe have more people present in the room, even if there hasn't been anyone that's signed up for a public comment, not a bad idea, subject to the discretion of the chair, of course, just to say, if there's anyone who would like to speak on it, now's your time, just to make sure that everyone has a full opportunity to be heard.
Okay.
So there are some time limits for public comment. It's typically 10 minutes in support, 10 minutes in opposition. I doubt that you get too many that would be that length. But if you ever get a really hot button issue before you, sometimes we do have to be mindful of that time clock. And then after the public comments are closed, call for a discussion amongst the board if there is any. And then the chair, as you did tonight, call for a motion. Once a motion is made, that requires a second under Robert's rules. And then there's a discussion after the second has been made, and then a vote.
In the discussion, after the motion, can the discussion be with staff, or does it have to be with the?
So that typically is a discussion between the board members, but if there is a question for staff and the chair who's in charge of the meeting is okay with it, you hold the reins there, it's fine. It's fine and I'm sure staff is more than willing to answer whatever questions you have at any point.
Does it need
during
to
the
be
process.
formal? Try to say, we'd like to ask a question to staff, or is it just, can any member just kind of direct question towards staff, I guess?
That's really more for your decision on how formal you want to be as the chair. I have some boards who, basically want everyone to raise their hand before they start talking. And then I have some who handle it much more informally.
Okay. I'm the
So-
latter.
Yeah.
Ask away.
So, yeah.
So I'm learning all this, but the discussion would be if I disagree with the approval, right?
Not
that-
necessarily, not
Okay.
necessarily. So let's say, just like tonight, there was a motion to approve, there was a second. Someone who's very much in favor of the project might want to speak and say, I think this is a great idea. It's within the, public policy that's spelled out for this board. It would be, it's going to be a good project, fits into the overlay district. It's really a chance to advocate for that position.
Okay.
Or vice
Or
versa.
vice versa.
If you have some discord or something like that and want to call it to attention, then we can discuss it amongst the board.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
if we had specific recommendations, we would want to maybe suggest okay.
And then ultimately it goes to a vote. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if, we may have 5 of us that agree and you may disagree, then
Yeah.
that's when we do, all those in favor say aye. And then if not everyone says aye, then we'll call for any opposed, same sign. And then you would say that too. So it just kind of, is that correct? Or?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And I think too, just because I picked up on one thing you said there, and there's a slide that addresses this. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you will have some items where you want to approve it with conditions or make a recommendation to approve with conditions. And so the motion that would have been made, that would be on the floor, would have been something to the extent of, I move to recommend approval of this variance or whatever it might be, or with the following conditions, or with the conditions as discussed, as long as that adequately describes the conditions.
Then if we had a motion for approval, but then we had discussion after that, then we could say, okay, we'll recall that motion, say, all right, we'll a motion for approval with these conditions.
So once
then-
there's a motion and a second, it does have to be voted on. However, you can ask for a friendly amendment to the motion. This is where you get a little bit into the weeds with Roberts. And really,
Well, you're going to be here every Tuesday, right? Just to.
sure, we talked to Ken Gerard about that. But I don't want y'all to get too worried about, oh God, I have to become an expert in Robert's rules and I'll carry around the little pocket, edition like you're a, model UN, student in high school. I can only make that joke because I was one. But, it's really about the goal of Robert's rules and having that as a guide stone is to make sure that there is a clear and transparent record of what's being discussed, what's being voted on. And because after you leave, if you're a year or two, 5, 10 years down the road, and you're talking about something that DRB did or something that the Zoning Board of Appeals or whatever it might be, is all we can do is go back and look at how those minutes were recorded and how the votes progressed. And so that's the main goal here is keeping that on track. So under the hypothetical that we were talking about, let's say there was a motion to approve, no conditions, just motion to approve. It's been seconded. You've called for discussion. There's been discussion and perhaps Ms. Coker has brought up, it's not that I'm against it, but I really think that these setbacks need to be looked at, or we need to talk about more buffer vegetation, or we need to talk about, X, Y, Z. She can then say, would whoever made the motion, would you consider a friendly amendment to your motion to add those conditions on, and then you can move forward from there. Does that make sense to everyone? And staff is here to help you navigate that process as well. It's not as if we're relying on you all to know exactly what to do and exactly the right thing to say. We're whether it's staff or whether it's someone from my office, we're here to help you stay on those on the rails as well.
A friendly amendment is the technical term?
It is a technical Robert's Rule term. Now,
Say
and
that.
I mean, we can even dive deeper. And so perhaps the person that made the motion says, no, I will not accept a friendly amendment. Then you have to have a vote on the original motion. That's either going to pass or fail. Let's say it fails. Then whoever wanted the conditions can make their own motion.
Yeah.
And you can go on like that in perpetuity. So a little bit here just about, how you're wording these motions, whether it's an approval or a denial or a recommendation. That is important just because of where you guys are sitting in the procedural chain of how these items make their way through the process. So if it's a courtesy review, your motion is to recommend approval with conditions, recommend to deny, or you can also defer. A deferral would be for whatever reason it's not ready for a recommendation. And then these other categories, the certificate of endorsements and demolition permits, those are votes where the DRB has the final authority. So that is not a recommendation. It is a vote to approve or deny or approve with conditions or defer.
So what is an example of a courtesy review?
Jackie, you have a good
Yes,
example?
so an example of courtesy review is variances, use permit, rezoning, and sometimes there'll be cases that there's a new building plan that the board will first time hear it. Sometimes we put it as a courtesy review, just to give like feedback before it gets to a final review.
Knowing it'll come back through
Mhm,
again.
yeah.
Okay.
So it gives us an opportunity to share our feedback and thoughts with them before they really get down into, hey, now we're on this path to get this thing through planning commission, through DCA, all that. So.
Yeah, rather than putting all the money into plans that are not going to fit in with the overlay or requirements, that sort of thing. These are just some helpful tips on how to word your motions. We talked about some of it already. It talks about putting motions in writing and giving them to whoever is reporting the minutes. You can do that. I don't know that most people do that with you, Jackie. Or minutes?
Yeah,
Do they?
We
Okay.
record it. Yeah.
Yes. But I mean, do you have the folks who are making the motion,
Yes.
writing them down?
Put it in
Okay.
writing, yep.
Not all boards do that, so that's very helpful for
I'm not
staff
making a
if you
motion
do.
anymore.
Again, consistency is the goal. Avoid saying just so moved. So the chair may say, does anybody have a motion on this? Rather than just saying so moved, if you can say, I move to recommend approval, or it's really more like when you're talking about minutes, let's say the chair may say, do I have a motion to approve? Rather than just saying so moved, if you can actually verbalize, I move to approve the minutes from the February 6th meeting, just so it's clear, what needs to go in the minutes. Again, identifying items by their application number, either their application number or the number that they're at on the agenda is another way to identify what you're talking about. And then this is particularly if the motion is to deny, just for that clean record. If you can articulate if there's a piece of authority that you're relying upon in making a denial, that is helpful to include in the motion. So I move to deny, using an example tonight, I move to deny the demolition permit based on the fact that it's been identified as a historic site. That wasn't on the table tonight, but just as an example of what you could say. So conditions, I'm not going to go through all of this, but if there is an item which you are recommending approval with conditions, so this would be in the context of say, a variance. Maybe they're coming in and asking for a variance as to the setback requirements for a structure. And you want to condition that by saying, just to use an example that I mentioned earlier, buffer requirements. So this is a common one we see, right? That you can say, maybe this is supposed to by code have a 50-foot setback, and someone's coming in asking for a 25-foot setback because of how the lot is designed and how they need to put the structure on for engineering purposes. But you've got another structure close by, or maybe there's a school, or maybe there's something where you're worried about having too much encroachment on that property. A lot of times people will talk about, well, let's require a condition where we ask for more vegetation to be planted for buffering. Well, that's all great, but you have to word this so that it can be interpreted and enforced down the road. So you have to get specific with conditions. So it might be that the applicant has to plant a certain number of trees that are evergreen trees that are of certain height when they're planted. I mean, you can get very specific on these. Now, you don't want to get overly specific to the point that someone can't do it. But if you just had a condition that said, yes, we'll approve this with the condition that they plant buffer vegetation, nobody knows what that means. You have to get specific.
Because this happened last month, can we say that we would recommend to make an effort to include and plant privacy vegetation, but it was going to the BZA, right? So ultimately they would use listen to our recommendation, and then they can say, we want 6 to 8 foot Leland cypresses planted here, or do we need to go ahead and specifically say we want 6?
That's a good point, Mr. Chair, particularly because of how this is set up, that not all of our jurisdictions that we represent have multiple, bodies that this goes through. So if you want to leave it up, if you know that it's going to ZBA and you want to leave it to them and just say our recommendation is that you consider specific vegetation requirements, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But somebody may feel very strongly that it needs to be, a more detailed.
But we're making recommendations to BZA.
Right.
But these conditions would be for commercial properties? That- Or are we always making recommendations to either BZA or planning?
It was my understanding if someone's going for like a variance, and even if it is like pre-Milton, then we kind of have the authority to say, yeah, fine, it's there. We don't have the authority to say you can tear it, you have to tear it down, but we can say you have to make an effort or plant some vegetation to somewhat mask that. And then that goes to BZA, and then that would be a condition of our recommendation, right?
What's the difference
They
in,
have to adhere to that?
yeah, what's the difference in a recommendation and a condition?
So let me reword it a little bit, because when you're dealing with that type of motion, you're always recommending. You're recommending an approval outright, or you're recommending an approval with conditions, or you're recommending denial on these items that are going to a different body. Not on your demolition permits where you have
But then
final
if
say,
we
or
make
your,
those recommendations, does the BZA have to accept those recommendations and conditions?
they typically do not. They're doing their own review.
They're considering it.
Right.
Got it, okay. Confuse you more.
So are we making recommendations with conditions? Is that the wording?
For those items that we were talking about, the courtesy reviews, the variances, the things where this board does not have final say, where you're making a recommendation, the options are recommend just as presented,
Okay,
recommend with conditions,
okay.
or recommend denial.
Can we approve with conditions, or do we approve with recommendations?
So you're recommending approval with conditions.
Gosh.
I think we're saying the
So
same
it's like
thing.
we're saying that as a board, we recommend approval only if they
The
do
conditions are
these
XYZ.
conditions.
So every municipality is different, but even if we deny it, it still can go on to the board?
That's correct.
To
Correct.
That's
zoning.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. You're the first step.
Yeah.
In the procedural process of how
So
this
like
moves
last
through.
month, we approved to leave a shed on a property really close to the variance line. But we recommended that we add vegetation to. So that would be,
So that was
So is that a
a
condition?
recommendation to approve with conditions.
Was the vegetation the condition? Or was
Yes.
that?
yes.
So a condition is anything where someone's coming in and saying, this is a project I want to do, and here's my plan. Here's my plan. I want to construct this 4,000 square foot, facility on a, quarter acre lot or something. I mean, I know that that's a wild hypothetical, but, a condition could be something like, okay, well, we approve or we recommend approval of the design aesthetics that have been presented, but we condition this by saying it can only be 3,000 square feet or only 2,500 square feet. I mean, conditions can be all kinds of things. It can be the vegetation we talked about. It could be lot size. It could be design. It could be the lighting style. It could be the sign, like if it's a commercial property, how the sign is lit. Is it a backlit? Is it, I can forget all the technical terms, but it can be a variety of things. A condition can really be anything related to the project, as long as it bears a condition or bears a good faith relationship between the goals that this board is trying to pursue.
And what about staff recommendations? So does the BZA get staff recommendations and then board recommendations? Is that kind of how that goes?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, and staff always brings a recommendation, and whether it's this board or whether it's BZA, they're not bound by staff's recommendation. They do good work and bring you, their project and what they see. But, that's just a recommendation.
So what we
well.
present to you is more of just facts. Yeah.
Mhm.
Facts, not policy. It's kind of how we
But
typically look at it.
sometimes, don't you see things where you think they should be doing this and you may recommend that, or no?
We do. If
Okay.
we see something, we can make a recommendation to the board, but ultimately the board will have to make that, it's up to you if you want to adopt that
Mhm.
recommendation.
And usually staff will filter it to the point
Yep.
to where when it gets to us, it's kind of ironclad.
Will staff have conditions or just recommendations?
We call it recommendations, yeah. And sometimes we can put conditions as well. We present it to the board and the board can just determine, okay, this is a good condition, or I don't believe in this condition. You
Or
can
if they
have that.
present the recommendations, we can make those recommendations a condition.
And there are cases too that board adds, if there's 10 comments that I made, as a staff, the board could say, okay, this is good and good, we can add few more. Things like that.
All right. Any more questions on conditions?
I'm sure there will be more.
I'm sure.
getting
But this
muddier
is
and
something
muddier.
that even seasoned, folks who deal with zoning day in and day out and variances sometimes struggle with. So keeps people like me in business. Minutes, we've sort of already covered this, that after the meeting is done, when you're coming up to the next meeting, you will have draft minutes prepared. It's appropriate to circulate those in advance of that next meeting so everybody can review them, get comfortable with them, see if there's any changes that need to be made, and just how important they are, because they are, under the law, the official record of what transpired at the meeting. Even though in this day and age we have, video of everything archived, under the law, it's still what's in those minutes that are approved that are the official record. All right, meeting efficiency. There's really no magic bullet to what makes a meeting efficient. For one member, efficiency is going to look like something completely different from what it may look like for another member. So, really, there's just a couple of things that we kind of bring up as best practices when we're talking about meeting efficiency. Of course, having the chairman as the presiding officer to stay on top of the meeting, which obviously I witnessed tonight. You're doing a good job. Making sure that that there's a common understanding between all the members, that presenting an efficient meeting to the public really instills confidence in the public, that, everyone's taking their job seriously and, getting to their items in a timely fashion and making sure everyone gets a chance to be heard. All of that is crucial for any public body. Just a couple of slides about how to deal with questions as you navigate these items that come before the board. So obviously, there are times, just as you had tonight, that you all will have questions for the applicant or maybe even for a member of the public where you have someone who comes to speak either for or against an item. So there's no obligation for you all to ask any questions. But you can use those questions to gain clarity of the positions taken, concerns expressed, or to better understand the technical data. So just like with the plans tonight, where's this gravel driveway, or what are you doing with the retention pond, all of that sort of thing. This goes without saying, but you shouldn't use questions as a way to embarrass or shame folks, or otherwise as a prop to make a point. You are a part of the government now. For better or worse, as this slide says, and you are supposed to be able to take a tongue lashing and always be a model of restraint and civility. On the other flip side of this is sometimes you'll have, particularly in a public comment section, a member of the public who wants to ask questions of you all. There's no legal obligation for you to respond to questions. And we often advise board members just to say, this isn't a question and answer session. This is your opportunity to make your comment to the board. But it's also perfectly acceptable if the board so desires to attempt to respond to those questions. Just remember that once you've opened the door, you have to take all the questions at that point. You can't pick and choose whose questions you're going to answer.
For 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One tip that we have here is if you have someone who's asked a question and you want to make sure they feel heard, you can ask the person to talk to staff and have staff be able to address the question in writing or after the meeting at some point. Engaging in a back and forth during a public hearing is full of pitfalls for you as appointed board members. And usually it's always with good intentions, right? You have someone who's talking who is a concerned citizen who wants to know more and more. And, then all of a sudden, again, you're 10 minutes in and you feel like you've just been on the defensive the whole time. So take all that to heart while you're thinking about how you want to deal with that. All right, questions posed by members to members. This is really just about being civil to your fellow board members. The point is always to have a good discussion where it's called for, but don't be jerks. That's the takeaway from most of this. Tips on impartiality and transparency. I think a lot of this goes without saying, but you want to avoid anything that someone might take as where they could interpret a comment as a decision having already been made, that this is already a done deal. I know Joe over here who's the developer on this and he does good work, and so I don't have, it's things like that where you want to avoid even the appearance of impartiality or partiality, I should say. That's very important. If you're having a discussion during the meeting, this is an open meeting, you can't be whispering to each other. It needs to be full and transparent as to what is being said and discussed in the open. Here's some final thoughts. Personality should never be a part of the zoning process. Do not be afraid to ask the applicant to acknowledge an agreement to certain conditions on the record. So if you do have something that's full of conditions, go ahead. It's fine to ask the applicant. You've heard we've heard some of our concerns. Would these conditions be acceptable to you? If uncertain, ask staff or counsel. I know that you don't always have counsel here, so rely on staff for any questions. And don't be afraid to postpone. Rushed decision-making is typically poor decision-making. There's a few slides here. We can go through them if you want regarding ethics and conflict of interest. These are city code and state law that is applicable to all public figures, and particularly you are bound by the city's code of ethics. Most of it is very commonsensical, as to what you have done, and you probably swore your oath when you got sworn in already that you would uphold the standards and the laws, both of the United States, the state of Georgia, and the city code. If there's any specific codes about the code of ethics, I can try to answer those. Conflicts of interest. These questions sometimes come up where, maybe someone who's coming before the board. Perhaps you don't know them, but perhaps you have, your children have played a sport together or this or that. That's probably going to happen because this is Milton and it's a small city, right? So I'm sure you're going to have connections to some people that come before you. So what you want to be looking at is it says no city official or employee shall vote or otherwise participate in the negotiation or in the making of any contract with any business or entity in which he or she has a financial interest. So this doesn't really cover those scenarios where, you just happen to know this person. But the first thing needs to be, do I have a financial interest? If you have financial interest, common financial interest in any way, you need to be having those warning bells of, I might need to recuse myself from a vote. Those personal relationships, that's really only going to be something that you can answer is, can I be impartial in making this decision? My personal preference and what I tend to advise clients is that if you think that anyone could possibly accuse you of having a conflict, maybe you need to think about whether recusal is appropriate. Even if you understand, even if you know that you can absolutely be objective, it's all about appearances at the end of the day.
So if a board member recuses themselves, how does that affect quorum?
So you still have to have enough majority present to vote. So you have, what? You have six? Seven? Okay, I was like, you had an even number. So you need to make sure that you have four votes even with the recusal. So if there's only 5 of you present and 1 person recuses, you're still okay. If there was more than that, then it might have to be deferred to a time where you do have quorum. Again, potential remedies of conflict of interest: disclose completely any interest that the official might have in the matter, showing that the purported interest would not disqualify the official, and then recusal by interested official from participating in a vote. And that's it. Any other questions? Right.
Sure, there'll be more at some point.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, Jackie knows how to get in touch with our office. Paul Fricke is typically the attorney in our office that would have been here this evening. And so he's usually the liaison, but you might be hearing from me too. So it's great to be with you all tonight.
Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it.
All righty. Moving on. 8B, some DRB updates. Jackie?
All right, so the purpose of this presentation is to just give the board information on the status of different projects or applications that went through DRB that we reviewed, that we approved in the past. So one thing that I'd like to do, beginning this year, is to have either an annual update, or maybe if the board suggests a quarterly or a biannual update of the different applications that went through the board, I can certainly do that. I'm open to that suggestion. But our first slide here, just to show you that we capture all the applications that we reviewed in 2023. So this is the total of, and it's divided into 4 different categories. How many courtesy review that you reviewed, final review for LDP, for building, and for demolition. And we've reviewed as a board 65 total applications for 2023. And then the next slide, I just want to show you different projects that the board approved in the past. For instance, here we have California Hand Wash. It was reviewed and approved on September 12th. This project is already complete. So I'm just going to show you the before and after pictures. I thought it's a good, opportunity to show the board that, hey, you've done a great job of reviewing this. This is now the final outcome. So if you remember last year, we look at it, this is a former Refresh Car Wash, and California Hand Wash bought this and remodeled it. So this is what it looks like now. So I'm just showing pictures, and this is consistent with what they submitted to us, the building plan. and some interior. So they really make this place really very nice. And the next one here is Caribou Coffee. We've reviewed and approved it in November. This project is also complete. In fact, last week, there is a grand opening, ribbon cutting. This is the before pictures of the structure, and this is what it looks like now. And next one is Fifth Third Bank. It was reviewed also in November and approved. The status right now is the LDP has been issued, but building permit is ready for issuance. So we're just waiting for one requirement. But when it's complete, I come back and I'll show the final product. And so we have two new buildings, Reliant and Total Fitness, 123 Total Fitness. Both are in LDP process, while the other one has also submitted a building permit. So they're now in check. And lastly, I know last month we did talk about the status of the demolition status for 13325 Arnold Mill. So I've created this log to just kind of show what we've done in the past. So I'm not going to go over each of this. It just tells you the history of what took place with this property. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to, so we approved it back in September. We placed a condition. A demo permit has been issued. And of course, there's a lot of going back and forth with corrections and things like that. And then we sent code enforcement and chief building officer to evaluate some of the structures that require approval. And they determined that all these structures are not safe. So applicant addressed the correction notice, permit has been issued in November. Then we did a lot of several site inspections just to make sure that he put all the silt fence and the tree safe fence correctly. And then after our meeting last month, I spoke with code enforcement and just kind of checked and see what's the status if there's any demolition activities. And so far there was none at that time. So I contacted the property owner and left, a message, returned, emailed me back and let me know that he's doing the demolition on February 24th. I'm sorry, that's January 24th. It's correction. And then I sent code enforcement again just to check. There's no demolition process. So we're now in the last two items here. So that was yesterday. Fortunately, the code enforcement staff spoke to the property owner, and the property owner stated that the work would start this week. This morning, we had a final courtesy notice just sent out to the property owner with a compliance date of Friday. And if work hasn't been started by the end of this week, then a citation, that's the next step, will be issued next week. So that's where we are in the process. And hopefully, property owner will, comply and start the demolition process.
Hopefully.
Yep. So
Great.
that concludes my presentation for the updates.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
All right. Appreciate it. So moving on, old business, none. And final, I will ask for a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting of February 6th.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Robinson and a second by Ms. Gagney, Ms.
Gagney
Jackson.
Combination.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Thank you.